So I wasn't in the brewery business. My dad was the last president, though, of the Bruckman Brewery. And it started in 1856 and sold out in 1949. So it was 93 years old.
Wow.
And when I retired, I volunteered for the museum center, you know, where our Union Terminal is. And we have the heritage programs there, a group of docents, one of them that is here today, Don Gill. In fact, I'm as old as the museum center. I was up in the Good Samaritan Nursery when the museum was dedicated. So it's 81 years old, the museum, just like me. And I think it's in better shape than I am. I don't know. I sometimes call my talk Foam Sweet Foam, or actually with the drinking and everything in Cincinnati. Now, the very first brewer in Cincinnati was Davis Embry, and this was way back in 1811, and we were still busy fighting the Indians there and everything, and he came from Philadelphia. Well, in those days, you had to make beer in the winter time. Make it in the winter, and then release it in the spring. So he advertised to the farmers in Cincinnati that he would buy good, clean barley at 50 cents a bushel. And he hoped to buy enough of it and make enough of it to release it next spring. So he did so well on it that he doubled the order the following winter and everything. And he was really going to town there with beer. You want to know how beer is made? Actually, beer can be made from any grain. Usually it's made from barley, but it could be made from wheat, could be made from rice, as they do over in Japan. And what you do is you get some good clean grain, barley, and then you need some good clean water. Doesn't Coors out in Colorado, they say it's the water that counts and everything. So they heat that, the water with this malt, and cook it, or the barley. And actually the barley then becomes malt. So therefore then they take out that barley, the malt, and put it into another vat and add more water and keep heating it up to 212 degrees. And then you call it wort. But then you have to add some flavoring. And the real flavoring from beer is the hops plant. It's a vine-like plant, and they use the female pods for making beer. To imagine the taste of hops, picture some gym shoes left in a locker for about a year and everything. Then the stronger the hops they add, the stronger and tart the beer becomes. Czechoslovakia, they make Pilsner beer, and that's a very tart beer. The Germans, they like lager beer. Lager means stored. And with Cincinnati's hills, they could easily store it into the hills or into the caves or basements and everything in the breweries. So you're heating this and it becomes wort. Then you add the hops, and then the reaction, volley, you have both alcohol and carbon dioxide. So I make you all master brewers right there. Well, this Davis Embry, he was going to town, the only brewer in Cincinnati and everything, but along came competition. William Floyd came, and he offered to pay the farmers 62.5 cents a bushel. So here you had a price war right there, 62.5 cents a bushel. But this Davis Embry was pretty smart, because remember, you had to make beer in the winter. And during the summer, he had his workers make mustard. So they made beer in the winter, mustard in the summer. And William Floyd wasn't near a good watering place. So his brewery only lasted about 3 or 4 years. In fact, to show you how many different breweries Cincinnati had, Hudipole Shainling, at our city's 200th birthday, came out with this poster. And every one of these bottles and glasses represents a brewery in in Cincinnati. Just think all of the ones we had. We sure had a lot, didn't we?
Yeah.
And also the year it gives. What year it opened, what year it closed. One of the most common years that you see on so many photos here is 1918. That's when Prohibition came. And many breweries closed. In fact, Brooks, our brewery, was the only one that stayed open legally. And if you listen, I'll tell you how we legally, but here that just shows you all the different breweries. Right there. Okay, notice the names of these early Cincinnati breweries. Embry, Floyd. Another early Cincinnati brewery was Nicholson, Craney and Drum. Another one, John Walker. Do those sound German? No, they were English. In fact, there were very few Germans in the early years of Cincinnati. Actually, we were only 5% German until 1830. 5% German. Well, then you say, well, what happened? Why? How did all these Germans come over here and everything? Well, the reason you have to look at Germany in the mid-1800s. In 1830, actually, we were only 5% German. But they were, over in Germany, they weren't united. There was Bavaria, Saxony, Thuringia, and they would war against one another. Well, a lot of the German men, they got tired of fighting and everything. They said, let's go to America and everything. Also in terms of religion, in Germany, in northern Germany, they were Lutheran. Southern Germany was Roman Catholic. So if you felt unhappy in your religion, you would want to come over. Also the right of ownership. Let's say there were 3 sons in the family. Who would get the property? The oldest son, and the 2 other ones would have to leave and make their fortune elsewhere. So therefore they came to Cincinnati. The reason they came to Cincinnati was due to a man here named Nicholas Longworth. Nicholas Longworth, he was a lawyer, short man, but he dealt in property. You know, they'd go to see him as a lawyer and they'd say, can you take my case? And he said, well, have you got any money? And they said, no, but I do have land, because they got land when they fought in the Revolution. And so then he would take their land for a fee and everything. And next to John Jacob Astor in New York, he owned more land or property than anybody in the U.S., Nicholas Longworth. He owned all of the West End of Cincinnati, Eden Park. In fact, in Eden Park, he raised the Catawba grape and made wine. So you know they have hills there over in Eden Park where that is. In fact, he called it his Garden of Eden. So he advertised for workers to come over to the Garden of Eden and everything. So they could come 2 directions, either from Pittsburgh down the Ohio River, or like my grandfather, enter through New Orleans, go up the Mississippi River, and then into the Ohio River. And when they came here, they saw the hills and the river, and they said it looked so much like Germany. In fact, the Rhine River Valley, my wife and I took a cruise on the Rhine River Valley, and I nudged her. I said, doesn't this look like Cincinnati? And she said, oh, it does, and everything. So they liked it here. By 1840, we were 20% German. By 1850, 50% German. So they sure must have liked it here, right? And the thing is, they couldn't live in the rich 3rd or 4th Street area where Lido Park is. That's where the English and the Scotch-Irish lived. And they had to go further north. So at this time, we had a canal, the Miami and Erie Canal, and they went over this canal, which today is Central Parkway. You know, we built a road then when we covered up the canal. Central Parkway. They went over the canal and they called it going over the Rhine. Going over the Rhine, see? And they built those red brick houses. They built their churches, their schools, and they worked hard. It was a living city. When you walked in that over the Rhine, you wouldn't hear English. You would hear German being spoken in that over the Rhine. In fact, we still have a lot of those houses. Finley Market was started in 18. And every Saturday, the housefrows would shop in Finley Market. They'd scrub their sidewalks, plant geraniums in the window boxes and such. And this is their over the Rhine. In the schools, you had to take German. You had to take German in all the Cincinnati schools. Now, my dad, he came from a German family, Bruchmann. And so he got A in German class. Ach, die Liebe, sprechen Sie Deutsch. Was haben Sie gesagt? You spit it out. You know, that's the way they do that. He got A's. But my mother, she was Irish, half Irish. Her mother was a Schwartz, that was German. But her father came from Ireland. That's the one I'm named after. James Michael Purcell. And so she had trouble. Ach, die Liebe, sprechen Sie Deutsch, and you spit it out and everything. She had trouble saying that. So, in fact, the teacher said a very thoughtless thing to her one day. The teacher said to her, with your last name, you'll never learn German. And she went home and told her Irish father, Purcell, and he said, I don't want you in that German class. The next day he took her to school and took her out of the German class. He said, this is America. I want her to learn English. And so they took her out of that class. But that was something. But would you believe in World War I, we were fighting Germany in World War I. And actually the Cincinnati School Board fired 200 German teachers, 200 of them. And they would no longer teach German because that was our enemy. They also fired a symphony conductor because he was German. They changed the names, literally, of 8 over-the-Rhine streets. Berlin Street became Republic Street. Hamburg Street became Stonewall Street. So it's something what we do in a war, isn't it? How everybody then is your enemy. Germany and everything. But it didn't stop the Germans from coming over here. And they lived together in this over the Rhine area. You heard them speak German. They loved their music, their Sangerfest, their choirs, Manor Choir. And then they had a wonderful May Festival. And what did they build but a beautiful concert hall? Sangerfest Hall, it was called. It was a smaller version of the music hall. And one stormy night, the metal roof, they couldn't hear the singers. And they said, oh, we've got to change this. We've got to build a bigger place where we won't be bothered by storms. So what did they build but our wonderful music hall? In 1877, they dedicated. Do we still use it? We sure do. They have the wonderful Cincinnati Pops there, Eric Kunzel, May Festival, Summer Opera, Cincinnati Symphony. And who do we owe that to? The Germans, don't we? Also, they believed in physical exercise, education. Education there. They believed a sound body and a sound mind. So they started the Cincinnati Turners Club. Exercise. The Germans did that. Churches they built, both Protestant and Roman Catholic. Old St. Mary's Church. In fact, they said that near Main Street, they still hold services today there. In fact, they said the women probably baked the bricks in their ovens at home and brought them there to build the church. 1841. To this day, if you go to Old St. Mary's on a Sunday, they have at least one service in German. And they have German inscription by the stained glass windows and everything. Also, there were Lutheran churches there. So they worked hard, they sang, they worshiped, and they also started to like to eat in saloons. Saloons, their appetites. Since they were hungry, they really, and then the Germans perfected in the 1850s their lager beer. That's when they came out. To them, that was the champagne of beers. Lager. Wasn't as alcoholic as the English beer, stout or porter. Maybe you've heard of Guinness beer. Guinness is a dark, that's English or Irish. But they didn't like that. They liked this lager beer. They called it the champagne. It came out in the 1850s. So saloons started to grow up in all over the Rhine. Saloons on the corner. And this was the social life for these Germans. And actually, to get you into them, they offered a free lunch. Imagine, a free lunch. And the glass of beer was as big as a malted milk. A nickel. A nickel for a glass of beer like that. And today, we were at the ballpark last night, through the rain and everything. But today at the ballpark, it's $8 for a bottle of beer. And can you imagine, it was a nickel in these German saloons, a nickel. And then they'd give you a free lunch and everything. Here's what they gave at the free lunch. Sample rooms generally set a lunch of roast beef, olives, crackers, and cheese. The beer saloons have a greater variety and always greasy food and salty fish of some kind. Now you know why they wanted it greasy and salty. You'd drink more beer, wouldn't you? Right. It was spread on a cheap wooden plate. The meat was cut in chunks and piled on a big platter. On others are chopped herring, anchovies, sardines, black bread in pieces an inch square, big fat white radishes, potato salad, pumpernickel, and blood pudding cut into slices. Blood pudding. It's something like Geta or Scrapple, something like that. When I was down at Findlay Market about a year ago, I said to a meat merchant there, have you got any blood pudding? He said, well, I don't have any for sale, but maybe right next door. Maybe they have some, and they didn't have any. I understand there is a Stalin's meat store on Coleraine Avenue near 275 North. Stalin's, and they have blood pudding, but I haven't gotten up the courage to try it. Every customer or lunch grabber was expected to buy a glass or so of beer. That was the thing they were interested in. So they really used the saloons, and they grew. And they believed in singing in the saloons, enjoying it, singing. Gemütlichkeit, that's the German word meaning happy times, good feelings. In fact, in the saloon, most of the saloons had a Schnitzelbank poster. My wife owned it. A Schnitzelbank poster, and a Schnitzelbank is a cutting board. Here's a sketch of it right there, a cutting board. And it went something like this. Ist das nicht ein Schnitzelbank? Ja, das ist ein Schnitzelbank. Ist das nicht ein Snickelfritz? Ja, das ist ein Snickelfritz. Ist das nicht ein Tannenbaum? Ja, das ist ein Tannenbaum. Then you repeat them. Tannenbaum, Snickelfritz, Schnitzelbank. And then the chorus. Oh, die Schönheit an der Wand, ja, das ist ein Schnitzelbank. See? And here's some other ones here. Kurz and long is short and long. Hin and her is like a swing back and forth. A Kreuz and Quer, a crossboard and a straight board. Schießgewehr, shotgun. Wagenrad, wagon wheel. Krumm und grad, curve and straight. Großes Glas, you know what that would be, a big glass. Großes Glas. Ochsenblas is an ox bladder. Half and mist is horse manure. Maybe you were called this when you were growing up, Snickle Fritz. They say, you little Snickle Fritz, that's a naughty child. You little Snickle Fritz, we'll get you. Betty Sal, a fat Sal. Tannenbaum, you hear this at Christmas, don't you? Christmas tree. Dickie Frau, a fat lady. Langermann, a tall man. Hochzeitsring, a wedding ring. And then if you've had too much beer, you start seeing these. A dragon, gefährliches thing. From here. Ist das nicht ein großes Glas? Ja, das ist ein großes Glas. Ist das nicht ein Dickie Frau? Ja, das ist ein Dickie Frau. Ist das nicht ein Haufen Mist? Ja, das ist ein Haufen Mist. Haufen Mist, Dickie Frau, großes Glas. Oh, die Schönheit an der Wand. Ja, das ist ein Schnitzel. Good time, see happiness. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah, yes, ma'am. You.
I was going to say, my grandparents, when they were having a party, they'd have one of those boards and they'd point to everything and sing.
Yeah, and sing it.
Yeah, I can
Good
remember
times.
Little...
Right, and that was in the saloon.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and,
we had it in a home.
And at home, too.
Home, yeah.
This is our family Schnitzelbank poster. Right there. Okay. Also, every self-respecting German man had a growler bucket. Every German man had this, and they loved it. They lived with it at home. They'd take it to work with them. And when they bring it home, they bring it full, of course, right by their chair in the evening. And they, love that German. This costs, say, about 25 cents to fill this all up. And the reason they called it a growler bucket, if you got too much foam, you would growl. You wanted more of the yellow stuff rather than the foam and everything. And you know, after they finished it, through the mid-evening, they wanted some more. So their children or their grandchildren would say, Papa or Gross Papa, I'll take this down there and I'll get it filled up for you at the saloon. So then they'd go down and get it filled up. And while they were there, they could get some free cheese or a sausage. And you know, they never had to show a driver's license at all. Children getting the beer for their Gross Papa and everything. They take it home. In fact, when I've given this talk before at elder hostels and some other nursing homes, they'd say, oh, I did that as a little boy, or I did that as a little girl, or my grandpa got it filled up, the growler bucket. In the daytime, they take this to work with them. And when they got to work, they put all their growler buckets in the corner. And then at noontime, one of the workers was appointed to put them all on a pole. And he had to go down to the nearest saloon and bring them back filled up. So at lunchtime, they had beer breaks. Think of that. Wouldn't that be wonderful if today we could have beer breaks and things? Yeah, that was the growler bucket, that part of it. So Gemütlichkeit, having a good time. And actually, the over the Rhine area really got crowded and everything. Today, I would say there are about 8,000 in this over the Rhine. In the heyday, it was 100,000. Can you picture all those people in there and everything? And they wanted to move up to the hilltops. And what did we build? 5 inclines. 5 inclined streetcars and platform cars that would bring the people up the hills of Cincinnati. You know, they call us the city of 7 hills. Yeah. Well, the very first incline they built was Mount Auburn Incline, and then they built Mount Adams. It's a shame that we couldn't have any kept them. You know, if you go to Pittsburgh, they've got 2 inclines there, 2, and they're fun to ride. Mount Adams Incline closed in 1948. That was the last one. That was a beautiful one that went up to Eden Park and the Art Museum, the Playhouse, and the gazebo and such, but they closed it. How many people in here rode the See, there you go, the Mount Adams incline. There's some more right there. Okay.
I rode the one that went up to Price Hill.
Right. Okay, the Price Hill incline, that was one way to the west and everything. It was named for William Price and everything. And when he built it, at the tops of 3 of the 5 inclines were incline houses, saloons, and dance halls. 3 of the 5 inclines had that at all. And at the Price Hill incline, because he was a temperate, he didn't believe in alcohol. So the locals called that Buttermilk Hill. That was the strongest drink you could have, buttermilk and everything. And down at the bottom of the Price Hill incline at 8th and State was the Last Chance Saloon. Your last chance before you went up there to get that. But when William Price died, his sons realized you could make a lot more money selling beer and wine. So they started selling that in the Price Hill incline. But that was interesting. The early people called it Buttermilk Hill, that part. Also, there was the Ohio incline, Clifton incline, Bellevue, and they had an entertainment house. It went all the way up to Clifton. Then there was the Fairview incline. Now, they didn't have an incline house. That was mainly just for bringing people from the lower over the Rhine up to Clifton Heights, Fairview. And then the other incline, Price Hill incline. The Highland House probably was the largest incline house at the top of Mount Adams. Highland House, and on Sundays our symphony would actually play up there. And this was the most popular day for the families. So the German people would take their children with them and go on up the Mount Adams incline, listen to symphony. In fact, on a Sunday they could have 2,000 people. Can you imagine that with a symphony? And then when it was over, of course, they sold their beer and wine on Sunday there. And they would go back into the over the Rhine to their homes and such. Well, everything was going fine until around 1880. And the Ohio legislature, boo, the Ohio legislature said no alcohol sales on Sunday. And that was their biggest day of business. So therefore, they started going downhill, literally. The incline started going downhill. Okay. And they closed one by one. Mount Auburn incline, the Mount Adams incline, Bellevue incline, Fairview, and then the Price Hill incline. But it was a wonderful period in our lives. It's a shame we couldn't have kept one of them right there, that part of it. But to the Germans, they were starting these breweries. In fact, every over the Rhine street, every block had a brewery. And can you imagine, as the children went to school, they smell all this malt and everything cooking and such. So they were really going to town. It actually grew and grew with the beer. And the saloons were the gathering place and everything. But you know, some people